All right. It is 2 o'clock. Halima, I'm gonna do a quick check. Are you good to go? If so, I'll do some introductions and then you'll get going. Sounds good?
Mm-hmm.
All right, perfect. Thank you all so much for joining. I'm seeing the participants slowly increase. We have about over 12 folks joining in on this presentation. So we so appreciate you coming to our first ever virtual HSS Student Research Symposium. So we're so happy that we were still able to provide this symposium for our students because we know how important their research is to the humanities and social sciences. So we're very happy to host our presenters today. And our very first presenter of the day from this 2 to 3 hour time block is Halima Babib. They are an undergraduate criminal justice student, and today they're going to talk about the Passerby Project. Can desolation be alleviated through discussion? So I'll pass it over to Halima. Thank you all. I will
Hi.
also share, oh, sorry, Halima. You can also, if there are any questions that arise throughout Halima's presentation, you can click on the Q&A box and it will appear. And then after the time is up for Halima's presentation, we'll then go to the Q&A box to see if we could address any of the questions before moving forward with the next presentation. So hopefully that helps you all. So give a warm virtual welcome to Halima. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. My name is Halima, and I'm going to be presenting on the Passerby Project with a specific of can desolation be alleviated through discussion. Before I do get into my topic, I would like to say that I am not a psychology student. This is a research I started because of an interest, like a hobby, and I wanted to know better. And also that the sample size to this study is extremely limited. So if I were to have a bigger sample size, um, where obviously I had more people participate, I would be able to have more conclusive evidence. But basically, before I started my research, I had to first of all define my terms. And so one of the terms I had to define was desolation. And basically, for this project, I said a desolation is a state of complete emptiness where an individual feels detached from their surroundings. So obviously, as you can tell, this is more of a feeling rather than something that's substantive. And then I also had to define alleviation. And alleviation is a process of making one's detachment less severe. Now, if you notice, the definition for alleviation is more broad than the definition for desolation, and this was done intentionally. And I do understand that with the definition for alleviation, you can have alleviation done through multiple methods such as injection and all that. But for this purpose right now, we'll be focusing on discussion. And I did it intentionally and made it broad so that in case maybe someday I need to take the project even further, I would have the room to be able to do that. So basically, before I do get into it, I have something called the pyramid of survival. And this is basically where the different type of needs are put on a scale on the pyramid. And at the top of the scale, we have physical needs. And these physical needs include things such as food, water, and shelter. And they're basically things that if you don't have it in a limited amount of time, it will threaten your survival and you most likely will not even be able to be alive. And that is why it is a lot thinner, because it has a more sense of urgency than the other needs on this triangle. Then we also have social needs. And I describe social needs for this purpose as basic human interaction. That includes just seeing another person on a daily basis, not necessarily having to converse on anything deep, maybe just saying hi, hello, how are you? Just basic human interaction where you're talking to someone and they're talking to you, but it's not necessarily that you're getting to know them or you feel that you have some type of connection with this person, and it's not necessarily true for them to feel that way about you. And then psychological needs. Psychological needs, it's at the bottom of the pyramid because it is the need that even if you don't have it, you are able to function for a longer time than those other two. You're able to stay sane and kind of just go through day-to-day life. And this is basically the psychological need I describe for this is basically a person belonging in a community or feeling that they have a sense of belonging in a community, but also with that sense of community comes growth. So for psychological needs, we basically have two parts, and that is the sense of belonging, or feeling the sense of belonging to a community, and then also growth, being able to grow within that community internally and otherwise. So how does desolation happen? Well, desolation happens in multiple ways, but usually there's some type of trigger that will lead to a disconnect. And for everyone, I understand that this is very different. The trigger is different for everyone. For some, it could be grief or the loss of a friend, or for some, it can even be the loss of a pet or something. But there's some type of loss, and obviously, yeah, we're focusing on loss in this case, but there's some type of loss that happens that triggers for a person to feel disconnect. So let's say, for example, maybe someone had a mentor in a specific community that made them feel like they belong to that community, and maybe this mentor decided to leave the community or they passed away, and so now this person feels like they don't have a place anymore in this community, and this will lead to a disconnect because their ideals and the things that they're doing in the community, they will feel like are no longer part of them, but they have to do it because for multiple reasons, obviously. So what happens after the disconnect? Well, after the disconnect comes isolation. This is a period where, like I said, a person is disconnected. They feel like they don't belong to their community. So even if they try to be a part of it, they're not really being a part of it. They're kind of almost like mentally checked out. And sometimes we also do this without really noticing. Perhaps you've been going through a stressful time in your life, and then after some time, you have a friend come and say to you, "Hey, like you've been absent for a few days, like I don't see you anymore, you don't speak, you're not yourself anymore." And then that is when you start to reflect and you realize that, wow, I have truly been isolating myself away from people. I've been staying away from people even without realizing that I'm doing it. So this is one of the effects of the disconnect that happens with that community, is that individuals begin to isolate themselves, because in a way you start to make yourself believe that you're no longer a part of that community. So even though they're not sometimes intentionally doing it, they begin to check out of their community. So basically the whole thing, the whole question that this research was looking at, or that I wanted to answer, was can desolation be alleviated through discussion? And the answer is yes, it can be, but there's a but to it. And this is that it has to be a certain type of discussion. It cannot be just any type of discussion. And that is the but, because you can have a discussion with someone based on how their day was, but if they don't feel that connect, if there isn't that sense of belonging, like I said, once again, then it's just that, it's just a discussion. It's not really bringing a connect. So what you have to focus in during this moment of discussion is look for something that will allow someone, once again, when we go back to the pyramid, that will allow someone to have a sense of belonging, to feel like they have a place. And I believe that some of the effects of desolation, like isolation, can be alleviated. Maybe for some, it could even lead to a cure, but for most, it would just alleviate the process. And that is pretty much what I have for my presentation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Halima. So I will open it up to some audience questions. So thank you so much for that informative presentation. We do have about 3 more minutes or so left. So as a reminder, you can select the Q&A box at the bottom of the middle of your screen to submit any questions you may have for Halima. And also, if folks are wondering, all audience members are muted, and you likely aren't able to see that you're in this webinar. So unlike Zoom meetings, this is a Zoom webinar, and so you are muted and your video is turned off for the session. So you're only able to see the presenters, the host, myself, and the screen that is shared. So hopefully that helps clarify some questions if you were wondering. So we just got a question through our Q&A box. So Halima, I'll read it out so everyone can hear. In your research, what strategies did you find can be helpful in developing that connection that is critical within this process? And that's from Jacqueline Girali from the Disability Support Services Office.
Hi, thank you, Jacqueline, for your question. And the strategies that I found that can be really helpful in developing this connection is listening when people talk. A lot of us listen to respond and not really listen to people. So I believe that listening to people, uh, just about the things they're saying, sometimes it can be just about anything. Maybe they tell you they have a nice day, or they really like this type of coffee, and then someday you come to them with this type of coffee and you say, hey, the other day you told me that you really like this coffee, and I took a note of it. I took like a mental note of it, and so I stopped by a coffee shop today and I give it to you. It's just showing the individual that you're listening to them, and that you remember the things they say, and that they matter to you. Though that was the strategy that I found most effective. But the other strategy that I found effective again was creating a safe space for the individual, where they felt like if they shared their concerns or the issues that they felt like they may be dealing with you, you wouldn't judge them or shut them down. And even if you didn't understand what they were going through, or what they were saying, you would try to make an earnest effort to try to understand.
Perfect. We're getting some more questions through the Q&A box. So I'll go to the next question from Robert Ortiz. So the question is, so if I know of someone, I can start a conversation with someone that is in isolation by saying, quote, the group has missed you and we were wondering about your well-being, or no, or is that not correct? So can you elaborate on that, Halima?
Thank you, Robert, for your question. And I would say there is honestly nothing wrong with that question, but then you also have to be careful about how you're wording it, because some individuals might take it the wrong way, or that kind of like you're prying on them or something of that sort. But as far as I'm concerned, a lot of individuals will take it in good faith. So it also comes back to knowing your audience and the person you're discussing with and whom you're asking this question to. But I would say fundamentally, there's nothing really wrong with the question, because it shows that you've noticed this person's absence and that you want this person's presence in the group, and that's why you're asking.
Great. Thank you, Halima, and thank you, Robert, for that question. And perhaps our last question that we'll take for Halima's presentation comes from Romarilyn. And their question is, in your research, did you find gendered, racial, or economic differences?
Hi, Romarilyn. Like I said in the beginning of my presentation, my sample size was extremely limited. So unfortunately, this was not something that I was able to look at, but it's a very interesting question. And like I said, I'm hoping to someday be able to expand the project. So if that were to happen, that would definitely be something that I take a look at.
Perfect. So lots more future research opportunities in the works for Halima. Sounds like it. Well, thank you so much, Halima, for the presentation and for answering the audience questions for us. We'll give you a virtual round of applause. So I will bring in our next presenter. So thank you, Halima. So give me 1 second to do so.
Me.
All right, so our next presenter for this afternoon, add them to our presentation. So that is Ginny Oshiro. So Ginny, you should be getting prompted right now to join our presentation. And as Ginny is getting settled on our virtual screen, I will introduce Ginny for this presentation. So for our 2:15 time slot, we have Ginny Oshiro. Ginny Oshiro is an undergraduate student who is majoring in criminal justice. And they are presenting on California Assembly Bill, so AB 109. So I will pass it along to Ginny. And again, you can insert your questions in the Q&A box while Ginny is presenting, or we can address those at the end of her presentation. Thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction, Dr. Moreno Yamashiro. I am Jenny Oshiro. I'm a criminal justice major. I minor in Asian American Studies. I am a senior. I'm graduating here in a couple weeks, and I plan to go on to grad school at UC Irvine for the Criminology, Law, and Society program, and I'm super excited about that. Just to be totally transparent, I'm pretty nervous. I've never presented this way before, but I really, really appreciate the opportunity to present here. So thank you to Dr. Moreno Yamashiro and Dr. Stern for organizing this. And I really appreciate my mentor, Dr. Herrera, for helping me find this research project and carry out this research project. And I want to thank Project Rebound as well, Romarilyn, who's here, who has empowered me to do research on a correctional system as a formerly incarcerated student. So that's been really, really important for me. And I want to thank everyone else who is here virtually to support me. I'm super nervous, but I'm pretty sure I know all of you. So thanks for showing up. So I did this research project on California Assembly Bill AB 109. Dr. Moreno Yamashiro, can you enable my screen sharing, please? Okay.
Perfect. Yes, did that. So hopefully it should be working.
Thank you. And just to let y'all know, I did this research project about a year ago. And so it was really important for me to develop my understanding of policy and how it can impact the criminal justice system and how it impacts people. But the reason I thought it was important to present here today is because some of these themes might seem familiar to some of you. Like just as an overview, this is going to be an overview of what was happening in California's history and like what set the stage for AB 109 to pass, what the court cases were. There was a lot happening politically to make this possible, why people thought this was a solution, and the goals of this policy. And I'll get into a little bit about how people were funded, how it affected sentencing, and how it affected custody. This project also focused on how Orange County specifically implemented AB 109. However, I feel like that's less important today. And we were also hoping to look at how this policy affected women, but there really hasn't been too much research done on how it would affect women. So, sorry, just getting my notes here. Y'all can follow along pretty much with the poster. Just so everyone knows, this poster typically I would just bring to a symposium and I would stand by it and people would come by and be like, tell me about your research. So here we are. An overview of the need. So in 2011, California faced a $25 billion sorry, my windows are opening on my screen and I'm trying to close it. So in 2011, California faced a $25 billion deficit because of a recession that started in 2007 and ended in 2009. And it was called the Great Recession of California. In 2010, the state was not projected to recover until 2015. So Governor Brown addressed the legislature and asked that legislatures enact large-scale budgetary measures. And I think that that's really what I learned here in this project was that, AB 109 is known for being the largest correctional experiment of all time. It's also known as the largest failed correctional experiment of all time. But this wasn't about impacting the criminal justice system. This was a budgetary measure enacted by the state to save money. And I think that's particularly important right now because the recession that we're going through after this pandemic, and you know, like we just have to be aware of our history so we don't repeat it. So while this was happening, there were major litigation going on in the prison system. The 1990s particularly was known as the tough on crime era, and California enacted sentences such as life without parole, 3 strikes law, and determinate sentencing, which caused the prison population to swell. And at a certain point, it was 216% capacity. And so there was litigation in 1990 and 2001 that the overcrowding caused like unlivable conditions, and that the conditions violated prisoners' rights. And so the US Supreme Court agreed that the capacity was much too large. And so California was ordered to reduce the prison population size. But in 2006, there was another lawsuit and more litigation because California prisons did not comply with this federal order. So they were put under federal receivership. And so after 2006, when they were put under federal receivership, and in 2010, when we were coming out of a recession, Governor Brown, you know, asked the legislators to consider this large-scale budgetary measure. So, and I just think it's probably still relevant to point out that when surveyed, most of Californians felt that the prison system was broken, specifically California's prison system. And it's also important to point out that the US accounts for the 5% of the world's population, and more than 25% of the world's incarcerated population. So there's a huge disparity there. And when California was operating at 216%, its recidivism rate was over 60%. So mass incarceration was not working. So the goals of AB 109 were first, because it was a budgetary measure to reduce state spending. Second, to reduce prison overcrowding because of the federal order. And lastly, which I think was, you know, just a hope, but there was really no plan for, because it was kind of, you know, just maybe a side effect, maybe it'll work, was to improve the effectiveness of the correction system. So in the first 2 years, California allocated $7 billion for the implementation of this project. And like, while AB 109 sounds like it might work, because what it does is it realigns people who have non-serious, non-violent, and non-sex offenses to county supervision, because the belief was that because the state was unable to rehabilitate people, and that the recidivism rate was so high, people thought that at a local level more could be done, because people aren't being removed from their communities, and that perhaps the counties had more autonomy in corrections. So once this bill was passed, they allocated the money, but gave complete autonomy to 58 California counties, and how this bill would actually be implemented in their areas. So it caused for a wide range of implementation that's still not really fully understood. And they allocated $56,000 per person who was realigned from state prison to county to county custody. So that's a lot of money. And it's also a lot of money to incarcerate someone, period. But I just really thought that was really important because counties are receiving a lot of money to realign people to the county, to like be in county custody. So the other thing with AB 109 was that when people were realigned, they were meant to be realigned not to county jails, but to county supervision. And so that was, the spirit behind AB 109, that people, because they're in the communities, can be supervised and be rehabilitated in the community. However, when people, thank you, when people were realigned, and there was no oversight and total autonomy, 2012 study found that most counties just increased the size and capacity of their jail, including Orange County, which after AB 109 was implemented, Orange County Jail, while they did receive over $27 million in state funds within the first 2 years, did not increase their county supervision capacity, but they did reopen the women's jail. So now there are 2 women's jails. So I got the 1 minute wrap up. And so like the reason I thought it was really important to talk about AB 109 was because we are still like in this position where California prisons are overcrowded. They are over 100% capacity. They say they like to operate at about like 118%, but that's still not right. And, we're facing a pandemic with a highly contagious disease, and we're going into a recession. So I want to leave you with this, and this is supported by research. So I hope if y'all have questions, you email me or push back on this. But while decarceration could be weighed against the threat to public safety, the Supreme Court has found that it's possible to reduce California's prison population without harming public safety. Their trial and investigation found that California's chaotic and arbitrary way of incarcerating people led to unsafe and inhumane conditions. So I would just like to leave you with that. Thank you so much for allowing me to present here in this very awkward way in my living room.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm so glad you were able to present from your living room about AB 109. So I'm going to take some questions. I see that we have some already coming through on the screen through the Q&A box. And as a reminder, if you have a question for Jenny, feel free to click on the Q&A box and submit your questions for us. So this is a little more general question. Jenny, you're an undergraduate student, and so Elise is wondering, how do students begin research as an undergraduate student? Like, what's that process like? How do you do it?
Sure. I started doing research last year. I had a class with Dr. Herrera, and I'm not sure what your major is, but I found a professor who was very engaged with current research, and that was clear in the way that she was teaching her class and interacting with students and the content that was available in her course. And I went to her office hours, and she was very open when I asked if I could learn more about research. So I did this research as a 400 level independent study class, which is an option to most HSS majors. So not only was I able to receive credit for doing the work, it was really good experience, and it provided a space for mentorship as well.
Great. So you were able to connect to research by connecting with an instructor within HSS that was able to guide you and provide some mentorship. A lot of professors within our College of HSS, they have research labs, and you can be part of research groups. So if that's something you're interested, Elise, feel free to reach out to us and we're happy to connect you to the best of our ability. So thank you for that question. Our next question is from Robert. Their question is, what other budgets or programs were affected by the funding of AB 109? So that's the first part. More specifically, who was impacted by budget cuts? So pretty much, where did the money come from?
So the money still came from the state, although the state was running a deficit. Like they were still able to allocate. I have the formula. I'm happy to send you the report or talk to you more about it, Robert. But the state is able to allocate the money through their Treasury Finance Department, and the money is allocated directly to the counties. So like counties were getting more money, but states were getting, like state prisons were receiving less money. So it impacted both the county and the state. And while money was being allocated to the counties, the county was receiving the money. But you know, there have been reports of people spending the money on canine vests and new cars, and you know, so there wasn't too much specific language about how that money was going to be spent. So I just want to be clear that while the money was allocated to the counties, it wasn't being used to improve the lives of the community or people impacted by the justice system.
Thank you for that clarification. And thank you, Robert, for your question. The next one is not really a question, it's more a comment, but I'll share it anyways, Jenny. Says, great job, Jenny, exclamation mark. Thank you for sharing this information with us. Much needed incarcerated people matter too. So thank you, Melody Lim, our HSS career specialist, for giving Jenny a shout out. And then the last question that we'll take is from Ro Maryland. California recidivism, sorry, I'm not too sure. You can correct me, Jenny, on that. Yeah. Rate is still over 50%. What measures are still needed to reduce the state's correctional budget and decarceration prisons and jails? So Ro Maryland.
Ro Maryland, I love you for that question. I'm going to pull up the box because it's such a, Ro Maryland is my mentor. So I'm reading the question. Yes, California's recidivism rate is very high. What measures are still needed to reduce the state's correctional budget and decarcerate? So I think it was hard to kind of capture in this short amount of time, but I think that there are like Ro Maryland has especially taught me that policy is a really powerful tool to address issues, you know, in California, but specifically in the California criminal justice system. And I think that there are measures currently that we can take to allocate money more to people in the community so they're not facing issues that cause them to be incarcerated. You know, by providing resources. Also, there's a bill currently, AB 2200, the Racial Justice Act, that Ro Maryland is actually working on that's really important, that addresses sentencing and discrimination. So I think that there's a lot of things that can be done. I think it's also, you know, educating ourselves on the criminal justice system and how it impacts so many people, because I think sometimes we feel a little removed from it, and then really advocating with you know, your local legislators and state legislators to you know, decarcerate. Like I have the research shows that decarceration is not a threat, and actually incarcerating people causes more harm. So I think it's really just understanding and accepting that, and then finding you know, policy solutions that can go along with that.
Thank you, Ro Maryland. So Jenny, it seems like there's lots of opportunities for future research for you and for all of us for advocacy, whether at the state or national level. So thank you so much. That is all of our questions we have for Jenny Oshiro. Again, a big round of applause for virtual round of applause for Jenny for sharing a little bit more about AB 109. So Jenny, I will remove you in just a moment. I would like to share that our 2:30 presentation has been canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. And so I'll put up a backdrop for the next 10 minutes or so. And at 2:45, we'll resume our presentation that would begin at 2:45. So I wanted to give you that update. In the meantime, you're welcome to hop in on the session 1B, and then come back hopefully in 10 minutes to support our last presenter in this session. So thank you so much. All right, I think it's time to get going. I see that's 2:45. So thank you for those who were able to stick around and for those who have just joined us. My name is Dr. Moreno Yamashiro. I serve as the Assistant Dean in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. So thank you so much for joining us today for our HSS Student Research Symposium. Our next presenter for the day is Madish Riahi. They are a graduate student in TESOL, and they will be presenting today on English language in third world country, Iran. I will pass it over to you.
Hi, my name is Mattis, and I would love to share my ideas and my opinions about English language in third world country Iran, my country Iran, and especially because I do have experience in teaching in Iran. So this is my research about it. So first, I would love to talk a little bit about why is English important. Because in today's world, national geographic borders, they're pinned by relying on interactions and cooperations with other communities. So let's say that we're living in a global village. As a prerequisite for development and for communicating between in this global village, English has turned into a global lingua franca, meaning that we need one united language in order to communicate through this village. And this has become a challenge for different societies and also different policymakers in order to make changes in their lifestyles. And because this also is going to have an impact on their people, and it enables them to live a transitional form of living. Because the Western lifestyle, in specific American lifestyle, has turned into a model of global culture for the whole world, because language doesn't come alone, it has a culture with it. So this has turned into a problem, unfortunately, for some countries, including Iran, because this social phenomena has created a wave of concerns from some third world countries. I would love to share a little small piece of Persian culture, so you know how is English related to them, and then why is English important. Because since the early Silk Road days, so there was a road passing through Iran, Iranians have been used to meeting so many travelers and traders and so many different people as guests in their country. So probably that's the reason why, as soon as Iranians, when they see a foreigner, they will go to them, they will start a conversation with them, and they will take pictures, and they will just like most probably invite them to their homes and even suggest them to like show them around the town. And this is also interesting because last year I was reading some critics' point of view, because till last year we had still some tourists coming to Iran, and because of this cultural aspect of the Iranian people, they would invite them to their homes, and they would just like invite them for meals, and they wouldn't let them go outside like in a hotel. They said, yeah, why not just like stay with us? So, and then so many critics were talking about like, okay, this is part of your culture, but you're not helping the tourism industry, because tourists are supposed to come and spend money and help with the country's economy, but this way it's not helping any. So this was also very interesting for me to know. And then also knowing that having this culture means people want to interact and communicate with these foreigners, so they want to learn English. But the how, and then how effective is the English teaching in Iran? So elite's role in society is very important in every culture, in every different society, because the graduate people, they play a very important role in leading the people and changing their lifestyle, their mindset. They have an influence on just the normal people, because the elite, the graduate people, they have studied, they have gone their degrees based on an international standard, right? And then, so this is an international standard. This is the normal people. However, the Iranian government believes that because of this globalization of English language and the lifestyle that it has, the elite and graduates, they have been under influence of this Western culture, and they're not able to communicate with their own people. So this is the elite in a different level, in a like more accustomed to the Western culture. However, they don't want this interact with the normal people and have an effect on the normal people. They just want them to stay as traditional as they are. And this is also interesting because Iran, the first language is Farsi. The second language is Arabic, but there still was very basic English taught in school. However, because of this attitude and this belief of the government, they had to remove the English taught from even elementary schools. But that hasn't stopped people. They are still eager so much to learn, and English is part of their life, but in a little different way. But they're still taking all these English classes. So having this aspect, so that the government thinks that English probably is second priority for the people, and also the political situation, which I don't want to get into details. It's hard, so we don't have any foreigners coming to the country, and it's hard for people to go outside of the country. This has caused so many disadvantages and problems for the English teachers, because the English language teachers that we have in Iran, they can't operate their language proficiency, their content knowledge, or the pedagogical skills to meet the new curriculum requirements. And let's imagine that we have new books, and then we have new contents, but we also were lacking trained teachers to teach these new books, because the teachers are accustomed to old and traditional methods. Teaching won't be successful because there's this traditional teacher not trained, and we have these new books, so it won't go that well very much. And then also we don't have a trained fluent teacher, because of the lacking, for example, someone who going to Cambridge or going to Oxford, or just like getting trained based on the latest releases of the books. We don't have such a fluent teacher. And then due to lack of such teachers, most of the teachers, their teaching has been untrained, which means that there aren't any much qualified instructors. Now, this doesn't mean that the system, there are still a lot of English classes. However, they're mostly self-taught, or the English institutes, they do have their own like instructions and educations for the teacher, but it's not based on the latest updates of the world. So in order to close this up, as a result of this conflict, most educated intellectuals, they have immigrated because they have tried to help, but they found no point of it, so they just have immigrated. So I believe that, so we still have this young, fresh, young generation in Iran who are eager to learn. They love to learn English, and they're trying self-studying themselves. So I believe that helping them with teaching, providing them with latest teaching resources and curriculums and syllabuses and methods and everything, it will change many ordinary people's lives, and it'll help them to get familiar with the world around them. Thank you.
Any comments or questions for our presenter? I'll ask something. What do you think was the biggest takeaway from your research?
Actually, so it's interesting for me knowing, because this is my goal, is to go back to Iran and help the people, because I do have experience of teaching in Iran. Now I know what is the problem causing this and why is this happening. I was before like, okay, I didn't look at it this way, that okay, this is the reason, like going into depth of the reason why people's English, they're using the old fashioned. I always had a problem with it, and I just didn't know how to change the system. Like I knew that we shouldn't stick only with one book, we should change our method, but how? So now I'm so happy that I'm just taking this course. I'm studying for my graduate, and I'm learning how to specifically teach every listening, speaking, and learning it completely, and then so go change the method, teaching method that they have in Iran. This is my goal.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. We do have a comment and a question that just came in from Lucine. Please excuse if I didn't get that right. So they said it was very interesting, exclamation mark. How do you predict the future of the language teaching will be in Iran? So how do you predict the future of the language teaching will be in Iran?
Oh, thank you. So I think it is improving. It has in the past couple of years, because so people before, like let's say till 5 years ago, they were just like stuck with whatever they have, but now they themselves have to improve and just like reach out and see, okay, so how TED Talks are good. So how can I improve listening and speaking? I think it's so much better, but still it needs so much work to do. So I hope I answered it right. It's been better, but still need so much to do.
A little bit more work still, a little more progress to still make, which is why you're researching this and bringing awareness to it, which is awesome. Another question did come in from Anna. So the question is, how does this research relate to your personal life?
That's also very interesting because this also has, so before I just loved teaching, but now with what I'm learning, Fullerton, Cal State Fullerton, and it just, I'm looking at teaching in another aspect. It's just, so before it was just, okay, I love teaching, I love interaction with people, but I think like it has changed my methodology of just like, I look at teaching, how I just want, I hope that I can have an impact on just like people's lives and the way that they learn English, not just a very boring way, that old-fashioned way that has been taught in Iran, just like grammar-based, for example. I want it to be integrated and then have everything and make it more fun as English is fun.
So it seems like this topic is really important to you because it applies to your future career and what you want to do, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so thank you for that question, Anna. I
Thank
believe that is all the questions that we have for today, but thank you so much. And then after today's symposium, we'll connect to see if we can get a recording and maybe we'll add it to our symposium website, just so everything is fully clear for everyone to hear. Sounds good? Thank
you so much. Yes, perfect. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yes, and I will remove you in just a moment. And just for all the audience members, so this concludes session 1A of our HSS virtual symposium. And so at 3 o'clock in just 2 minutes, we'll be starting session 2. And again, that will be 2 different tracks, either option A or option B. And you can find all the details and the Zoom webinar links on our website, hss.fullerton.edu/symposium. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you soon at 3 o'clock. Goodbye, everybody.